So Ralphie did that, and then shortly after, like just a few months after that, that batch 4 won the World Whiskey of the Year at the World Whiskey Awards.
Yeah, that batch
And
4 was ridiculous.
to be honest, I thought like no one paid attention to that stuff. Like, like you get those emails about like award shows, you're like, okay, great. It was like, it was like 2 guys in Toronto sitting in a basement judging whiskey. Like,
hey, welcome to Super Social Club. I'm Jeremy.
This is Whiskey in the Six. I'm Rob.
Welcome to the Whisky Rant Podcast.
It's a little crusty.
It's frustrating.
And it's going to be a little bit of a rant.
I don't understand it. I don't know why.
Some sort of injustice.
Anyway, end rant.
Hello and welcome back to the Whisky Rant Podcast. I'm Jeremy.
I'm Rob.
And tonight we are joined by our boy James to check out some of Billy Walker and Glenallachie's newest little pet project here, the Meikle Tòr. Am I saying that right?
Meikle Toir. Yeah, if you're playing the drinking game, you're screwed tonight because James is talking, so now that's it. You guys are gonna be drinking all night.
Yeah, James, thanks so much for joining us.
Props for not mispronouncing Meikle Tòr.
There we go.
Because there was actually a side bet going of how you would pronounce it.
Yeah, I bet the mispronounce was heavily favored.
Oh, for sure. I could just imagine the conversations out west about us. Like these guys probably think we're two complete tools.
Rob, honestly, I think a lot of people that watch don't even really think about where you are or what the 6 even means.
I love that. I respect that. Because I have like a love for the West. I love the Albertans. I love the BCs.
I love out west, man.
The British Columbians.
Yeah, I love it out there.
I do.
Yeah, we don't have hate for them like they have hate for us.
Yeah, no, and I don't mean to like exclude any of the provinces in between that either. I love everybody in Canada and the US.
Yeah,
very true.
But anyway, let's get back to Scotch. Meikle Tòr in front of us tonight.
Made by the Connor McDavid of whiskey.
Billy Agreed.
Walker. Oh,
and this is something we all agree on. I think.
Are we saying Billy Walker is the greatest whiskey maker right now?
Well, I mean, I can't help but agree with that, but then I think I'm not going to even say it. But there's another distillery.
I think what it is that Billy Walker has an unbelievable skill at A, sourcing really good casks.
Yep.
And then B, managing them correctly.
Yep.
And within the style that he makes, he absolutely nails it. And it just so happens that especially in Canada where it's cold and we need whiskey that like warms the soul.
Yep.
The Billy Walker style works in that method, right?
Yeah, he's usually heavy on the sherry, heavy like this in this case, heavy on the peat.
Yeah, so if Rob still lived with his family in Sicily where it was hot, he wouldn't want to drink Meikle Tòr.
I would probably pick Sardinia, but I have nothing against Sicily. Sicily's beautiful too.
Well, James, why don't you tell us what the deal is with this line of whiskey that Billy Walker's putting out here? Because he's adding peat.
Yeah, it's a little bit unusual. So basically, Billy Walker acquired the Glenallachie distillery in 2017. The distillery was being used kind of like a factory. Like it was just pumping out whiskey for blends, especially like Chivas, Ballantines. But Chivas didn't really need it anymore. I mean, they've got things like that giant Dalmanic distillery. And, I think it just wasn't necessary for them to continue with it. So they sold the distillery and the stock to Billy Walker. And at the time, like, again, they were pumping out whiskey. They weren't really aiming for quality. So one of the first things they did is try to tweak how the whiskey was distilled. And so they went from making 4 million liters of spirit a year to under 1 million. So like less than a quarter. Mm-hmm. So basically just slow things down, right? And the idea is you're getting more flavor. The big one that everyone always talks about is the long fermentations. I know that during trials, they went as deep as like 400 hours of fermentation time in some of the runs.
So just tell people what the standard is.
Yeah,
like,
so the standard often is like 45 to 55 hours. Basically, you just like wait till it's done. Now, I know for a fact that Billy Walker also hates when you have short fermentations, like the wash like kind of foams up in the still, and that drives him nuts.
Yeah.
So is it just for the flavor? I think there's some other reasons there too, but
when it foams up, am I wrong in saying that like there's a chance that it could like spill and then they lose some of the sugars
on the side of the still inside? There's a few problems that can be caused.
Okay.
Admittedly, I'm not an expert in that, but I've heard stories like that. So yeah, distillers don't like that when there's like foam going up the neck of the still. Anyways, regardless, the it seems like the quality of spirit they're doing is better quality and kind of sneaky. They didn't really announce this, but I guess for about like slightly less than a quarter of the spirit that they were making, they did some heavily peated spirit. So they found peat, not the peat that you typically get, like from Isla or like from Port Ellen Maltings, but from town of St. Fergus, which is like kind of just north of St. Andrews a little bit.
Okay.
And so it has a different character, but they went really heavy on the peat.
Yeah. Do you know what the number is before? Like, I'll tell people what the number is on the actual bottle and box, but do you know what the number was going into the stills?
Yeah, I know it was over 90. I don't know
ppm.
exactly. I think they kind of explained to me when I was there that like sometimes those numbers aren't 100% accurate because usually what they're doing is like mixing lots together and it's tough to like track exactly what it is. So they just decided to measure it on the back end. So like what's in the final spirit. And part of the reason they did that is that as they were distilling these cuts, they actually were splitting the spirit into like different tanks based on what part of the time it was distilled in. So like you turn on the still, like the first stuff that comes out obviously is like poison, right? Like you're not supposed to drink that. So they separate that off. And then there's kind of like a center cut where the peat is like full bore. And that's obviously the turbo that we'll get to. So they kind of had this idea they were going to like separate it by like what parts had different phenols.
Okay.
And obviously they dialed that back a little bit and ended up, doing these releases based more upon kind of the wood that they're aged in. But that was kind of the original idea, was that you would measure the peat in the final spirit and not in the starting barley. If you have like an Isla spirit that's like say peated to 55 and say it's like, I don't know, 12, 15 years old, I think you're down kind of in the like 15-ish mark.
Interesting.
In the spirit.
So they measured this before it went into the bottle, is what you're saying?
So yeah, like right before it's bottled.
That's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So if Ardbeg, for example, notes in their distillate going into barrel measures 50 ppm, they just leave that forever. So that's like, it could be bottled at 30 years old and be probably more like 5 ppm, but or taste at least. I don't know how they measure that, but is that kind of like what you're suggesting?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, even like I know you guys were talking last week about like Lagavulin 12, which obviously is heavily peated, but like different years batches of that kind of tastes like they have different peat levels. I think it's probably fair to say.
Yeah, so, definitely. Yeah.
So they went heavily peated. Why don't you tell the people what we got in front of us here? Because we got 3 bottles.
Yeah, so we got 3 of the 4. We're missing the original, much to our chagrin because we were told it's a few people's favorite. So that sucks, but we don't have the original, which is a bourbon cask only, 5 years old, 48%, 35 ppm on the back of the box. The Chinquapin, did I say that right?
Yeah, Chinquapin
is 48%, 35 ppm, and that's a virgin oak. He seems to really like this. He goes back to it with Glenallachie a few times. This is kind of like the ode to Billy Walker here, right? Like his original is bourbon cask, the Chinquapin, which he uses in, I believe, his 10 cask strength, and a few of the other expressions in the blends that they're like when he blends them all together for his single malts. Sherry cask, is this a mix of PX and Oloroso or just Oloroso?
Yeah, it's PX and Oloroso.
It says it actually right there. Sorry, I should have read that. And then the turbo, which is basically the PX, Oloroso, Chinquapin, and bourbon all mixed into one. And then it's 70 ppm.
Yeah.
Coming like into the
Yeah,
bottle.
so this is what's interesting about the turbo is that it's actually the same barley as the other expressions, but because it's been taken from the center of the cut,
Yeah.
the actual peat in the final spirit just happens to be significantly higher.
There you go.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Bottled at 50% ABV, and there was a little bit less of this, I guess, because it's the hearts. It's like the heart of the hearts, as it says on the box. So maybe
Yeah,
there's just a little bit less of the heart of the hearts.
there is for sure. And it's unfortunately always going to be that way. Now, there's not like dramatically less of it,
Right.
but of course, just the fact that there's a little bit less means that people are kind of snagging them and holding on to them a little bit more too, which
Yeah.
unfortunately exacerbates the situation a little bit. We're all
Right.
actually, to be honest, all of us at Glenallachie are kind of a little bit. I think I was a little bit panicked when I saw that they named the turbo and that it had this crazy peat level.
Yeah.
But internally, definitely some people thought it would not be as hot as it has been. I think some people thought it would be kind of like seen as a bit of a niche and maybe like a little bit goofy for like a very specific type of customer. But clearly that person never came to Canada
Yeah.
because like
It-
this is
I think it's
totally up our
timing.
alley here.
I think it might be timing, to be honest with you. I think like we're so desperate for something extremely different than what we get. You know what I mean? And all these are
Totally.
very different than your standard single malt. Like they do have like this unique kind of peat to them in each one, but then when you get to the turbo, it's crazy different. Like it's turbo different. Like
Yeah.
it's, you know what I mean? Like it has this like really cool frankincense and myrrh kind of like incense kind of vibe to it.
Well, what I would say about Turbo is, I'll be honest, my favorite was the original.
Mhm.
I kind of thought that it showed the actual spirit off a little bit more. It's not as cast driven, and that's just the style that I like.
Right.
Interacting with a lot of people that try them, everyone's like, "Oh wow, the turbo's great." I don't know if if you had. I think the turbo becomes a little bit tiring,
I
and I
could see
think
that.
that's what the thought process was at Glenallachie, was that maybe kind of the novelty at some point would wear off, and that some of the other bottlings might have more staying power.
I think the other three were built to be pour and play, whereas the turbo is more like this
Mood.
is a cool like special
Yeah.
occasion. You're drinking other stuff. You want something that's gonna stand out. That's the turbo kind of thing, right?
Totally. Totally. No, I
James,
mean, I definitely got a lot of messages, people saying, "Hey, where do I get a turbo?"
Yeah.
And a lot of people like just only wanted the turbo, but I think, thankfully, like the price of the other ones, well, they're very affordable, right? I mean, they're usually like under $90 Canadian.
Mhm.
Um,
Which is great.
and I love that they put the age statement like right on the front.
yeah.
So yeah, I mean, good for like Lagavulin and Ardbeg for kind of pioneering that and making it mainstream.
Right.
And as long as the spirit's good, which in this case it is, it works.
Yeah. You had a question.
I was just gonna say, like the turbo, I guess maybe appeals to people because it is kind of like a younger, peated version of the 10-year-old cast strength
It
at 50% ABV.
it reminds me of something that I would expect from like an Octomore. Like just something different,
Yeah.
funky, like cool. And it kind of is like it might end up being kind of like the Billy Walker Octomore.
Right.
Well, I think for sure. I mean, I think they're conscious that that's the comparable.
Yeah.
Even the other Meikle Tours, like even the original and the Sherry and the Chinquapin, they bear some similarities to like those early batches that were maybe lower ppm levels.
Right.
Um, but
Well,
and
James,
keep in mind too, like Brooke-Laddie's peated whiskey is also not Isla peat.
Right.
yeah.
That's interesting. And a lot of people don't know that actually.
No, a lot of people don't know that. So, yeah, I mean, I worked for Brooke-Laddie back in the day. I remember them talking about that they ran the Port Ellen malt through the stills, and they felt like with the like big tall stills that they have at Brooke-Laddie, it just didn't produce the right character. Like it
Yeah.
didn't capture that Isla character right. But that when they put the like mainland peat through, that it had more of a distinct character. Which obviously, I mean, yeah, anyone who's tried Port Charlotte and Octomore, like it's pretty obvious that it works.
So where do they get their peat again?
So Meikle Tòr comes from St. Fergus, which again is like on the East Coast, like north of Aberdeen
Okay.
Right.
and St. Andrews, north of
James, didn't you allude to it at one point in time a while back that Billy Walker was maybe thinking about taking Glenallachie in a peated direction, and maybe that was one of his plans the entire time?
Well, I think that right away when they started doing this part of the experiment, they realized that like there's something unique here. I know that the person that we dealt with Glenallachie in the early days, he said that like when the peated spirit came off, as at the beginning,
Mhm.
everyone in the distillery kind of felt like they knew that they had struck gold.
Okay.
Like it was
Yeah.
something different. Yeah, there may be some other unique things going on in the distillation regime for the peated stuff. Glenallachie has this kind of weird setup where the condensers are horizontal because it was built in the 60s, so it's a little bit more modern. And the whole thing was actually designed to be gravity fed.
Interesting.
So there's some little like quirks, I think, that they kind of felt like,
Yeah.
maybe contributed to this kind of unique character.
And
That's
price
the thing, right?
point.
All these distilleries in Scotland, they all have these little tweaks. Like one of them has long line arms, one is descending, one is like onion shaped. It's like,
Yeah.
all these little quirks, and you move the sliders around and you get these kind of unexpected results sometimes.
Tallest, the fattest, the like whatever, right? Everyone's got their
Yeah.
little selling
Yeah.
point.
I think Glenmorangie is the tallest,
Yeah,
if
I
I'm
think
not
that's right.
mistaken.
Yeah.
The what's crazy about what people don't realize about Scotch, and I think this is true with probably all spirit, but I feel like it's most felt in Scotch. Two casks, and we talked about this off camera with the Ben Romick picks that we were involved in and you were involved in, versus the Caledonian pick that is also a Ben Romick, and they're sister casts, they're 305 and 306, and how drastically different they can taste
Mhm.
doing all the same things. You know what I mean?
Right.
They're filled on the same day. They probably have the same ppm level. Uh, Probably very similar Oloroso casks, or at least from the same
Oh yeah,
um,
everything's the same with those two
bodega,
casks.
right?
They would have sat beside each other in the warehouse the entire time too.
And that's what's crazy is they if you put them side by side and told people guess the distillery of these two casks, I do not think they would say those are both Benaramic. You know what
Yeah,
I mean?
interesting.
Like it's crazy how that can happen. And that's why blending in Scotch is so important. And that's why these guys don't get enough credit. Like a Billy Walker doesn't get enough credit, or like the guys that work under Billy Walker that are now blending the casks to make them, Meikle Tòr Chinquapin or Meikle Tòr Sherry. Like
Oh yeah, you're right. The blenders don't get enough credit. Like for
not
example,
even
you guys
close.
did that Compass Box video recently.
Yeah.
Like James Saxon took a parcel of 25-year-old Imperial and made it better by blending it with other things.
Yeah. That's nuts. That's
That is
crazy.
nuts.
That's crazy. Like
Yeah.
you're adding younger things to it, which like to something that you're like, this is fantastic on its own.
Yeah.
How do I elevate this? And then they find a way. You know what I mean? Like that's absurd.
Yeah, especially these Meikle Tòr, like the batches aren't that big, right? Like there's most of them I think have less than 10 casks in the recipe. So, you're dealing with a narrow window, but I think that's kind of Billy's comfort zone. I remember visiting Glendronach years ago, and while I was there, they were batching one of the batches of uh Glendronach 21-year-old. So sitting in front of the tank, there was two sherry butts. And I was like, "Oh, like what are those?" They're like, "Oh, those are the two butts that are going into the vat." I'm like, "What?" So there was one Oloroso that I think was like 24 years old and one PX that was 25. And that's the entire batch.
Wow.
So that's kind of like I feel like that's Billy's wheelhouse. But yeah, I mean, I'm sure like it's important to remember that this is like the tip of the iceberg with Meikle Tòr. Like I'm sure that you're talking about like the differences in character from one batch to the next. I feel like there's something about this spirit that when it's in different cast types, when it's at different ages, you're going to see like some very different sides of this stuff.
Yeah.
It is very unique. Like the profile is not like anything peated you've ever had before.
No, I was going to say it doesn't compare directly, I don't feel like, to anything else that's really out there.
Like it's definitely not Isla profile, but like it's not really even close to like other peated whiskeys in
Mhm.
Scotland either, right? Like, what are you thinking this is like?
I think the Chinquapin can be mistaken for an Isla. The
Like
sherry
Kalila? Like Kalila?
Kalila.
Yeah.
Bang.
Yeah.
You nailed it, because that's exactly what I was thinking, and I didn't want to say it out loud, but I think
There's
it
some
can be.
similarities with Ardmore in terms of like the nature of the smoke, and even I would say with Port Charlotte too. But I think what's different here is that like the Glenallachie spirit really is like, it has this kind of like solid fruity base behind it, and that is unique. Like I
You
don't
know
think
what I
there's many
think?
peated whiskeys that are also this fruity.
Yeah. You know what I think the peak kind of hides? There's a note in Glenallachie, and I don't know if it's because of the way it was previously distilled, but it's that like it's that old logo kind of like rock kind of like minerally kind of
Yeah,
note.
we always say that, like a
Yeah.
minerality
Yeah,
to it,
and that's
right?
kind of the inspiration I feel for the way they used to have that old logo.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that they captured that same character in this stuff, because I mean it's a completely different team that made this, right? Like the
I'm
first thing I
like,
thought when I tried these is like, basically in 2 years from now, they're going to have a batch of 10-year-old that's completely distilled by them.
wow.
Mm.
And they're still able to like produce that kind of similar flavor profile.
Well, you tell me. I mean, this is all, everything here is distilled by Billy.
I find like I do find that the peak hides that a little bit from me. Like
Sure.
I don't know if I would be able to say that this was Glenallachie if I tasted this blind. And I don't know if that's fair to say. Maybe like,
What would you guess this was blind if you didn't know it existed? That's what I was asking
all
myself.
three of these, I would guess a different distillery. That's what I was kind of like alluding to when I said like I brought up the Benaramic casks. Is like the Chinquapin tastes like a Kalila. The sherry kind of tastes like it could be like a Highland Park. It could
Yeah.
be like
It's
maybe
got
not.
that barbecue note.
Yeah, and like the sherry kind of influence to it,
Mm.
but then the turbo is where like, and I don't want to, I hate perpetuating hype because I think that's a bad thing for the market, because all these are really good, but the turbo is so different than anything I've ever had in my life.
It is one of the most unique whiskeys I've had in a very long time, if not ever.
Like it's way like, so I don't know if you remember that blind tasting I did with like for Aquavite.
Yeah, I do
But
remember.
he gave me this like weird like style peat of a peat that they only used once and they never used it again. And no one ever, you remember that?
Yeah, he threw you every curveball,
Every possible,
whiskey curveball there was.
which, like I'm actually like, when I look back at that moment, I'm like, I wish I would have that opportunity now to go back through that stuff and like really like sink my teeth into like some of the stuff he sent me, because maybe he just thought that I was like further ahead in my journey than I was.
Yeah.
Because that Pete, I really want to re-experience, because I'm kind of getting a similar vibe in the turbo, but not quite. Like there's this like, I keep mentioning it. It's like an incense, like Catholic church. Like as an altar server, I used to have to carry the incense
Oh, the
and like
smoking little like
the
pendulum
smoking like
thing.
pendulum thing, and like there's like, and then there's like frankincense and myrrh in like burning, and that's kind of what it smells like, but it's
There's
delicious.
someone out there watching that's like, I know what that is.
Yeah, there's enough Catholic Scotch drinkers. I mean, probably every
Right.
priest. So
Well, I remember one of the first like real experiences I had in the early Scotch days. I was at a master class. I think it was with Simon Brooking, who was working for Lafroig at the time. And I remember one of the lines that he was like known for was talking about how he would like say that there's like seagulls in their peat. And then yeah. So like he's trying to be rambunctious for sure. But he also had this line about how Lafroig has like all the flavors that Speyside whiskey has, but then has all the peat on top of that.
Yeah.
Like you don't sacrifice those other flavors in the peat. And I think Meikle Tòr, like that's totally the story for me, is like you're getting all the Billy Walker sherry, you're getting all of that like robust Glenallachie style, especially with the long ferment, it's like dialed up. And then you're getting the peat on top of that. It's like you already had these two big elements if you were like having a bottle of 10-year-old. And now you've got this other big element that's speaking that like didn't sacrifice the other elements. Like
Yeah.
it's almost a lot to take in. And like most other peated whiskeys aren't built that way. There's a few that are,
Yeah.
right? Like that Lagavulin 12 the other day. It's built that way a little bit.
Yeah. It's funny, like this Meikle Tour Turbo is so different.
Yeah.
But like so different good.
Do you want to rank them in your favorite?
I can't. I don't want to.
Well, I'll do my ranking. I've thought about this a lot, and
Okay, yeah.
Okay,
ordered
yeah,
the
let's hear it.
samples.
I want to hear it.
So yeah, again, I think like if these whiskeys were designed to like shoot to the moon and be like the best peated ever, I might then lean towards like, okay, the turbo might score more. But yeah, I thought for me, original was a clear number 1. And then I had Sherry 2, Turbo 3, and Chinquapin 4.
Interesting.
That is interesting.
Interesting.
Okay, what would you say? Okay, I'll go.
Go. You go.
So I would take the Turbo as my favorite.
Yeah.
Just because I think it's like worldly different than anything I've had, and that's cool. I would take the Chinquapin, the Virgin Oak, second, because I think you get this like really subtle, spicy graham cracker, cinnamon kind of twirl to it.
Yeah.
It's enticing.
And then you get fruit, like fresh fruit, right? It's like it's really good. The sherry is also great, but I don't know. I think that it comes in last for me.
So I hate that we have the same answer.
Me and you do?
You and I, yeah. And the reason why I hate it is because like I wanted to love the sherry. And I do like it. Like I would buy that at the price point. I think it's bang on exactly what it should be.
Can we tell people what the prices are?
These are all sub $90.
Yeah. Like 80 to 90.
Some
Canadian, right?
some people are charging a little bit more for the turbo.
Yeah.
Yeah,
because it was
and do
less
I think
available.
that based on what happened this first go that the turbo will see a bump in price? I do,
And
unfortunately.
if you can even find it, right? It's
If you can find it,
it went
exactly.
quick, right?
It went very quick. Like I think I told this story a few times, but I traded for this bottle of turbo, and then my buddy, not this buddy, but another buddy actually, and
I'm not your buddy guy.
I'm not your guy, buddy.
you are my buddy, but just not the guy that I split the bottles, split these bottles with. I split these bottles with my boy P-Boss.
He's not your friend, guy.
So they're all really good, but that unique peat on that turbo is stupid.
Yeah.
It's like it's bonkers. It blows me away. I hate the fact that I'm perpetuating this hype, and I know James is like crawling in his
No, I'm
grave
okay with
right
it. You know,
now
you know what it is for me that we all do, and where I think this comes in is the first thing I did when I got my turbo sample, my little vial. Like I took it and I pulled other bottles off the shelf that I really wanted to go head to head with it.
Mhm,
Like I pulled off that like 59.9% 23-year-old Sherry Kalila.
mhm.
So I'm like, how does this drink right beside it?
Yep.
You know, I pulled out an old Octomore 7.3. I'm like, how does that compare to this? Like, where do they all stack up? Like, how does it sit?
Yeah.
Because these Meikle Tours are big flavor. They're in your face. There's a lot going on, even though they are harmonious. But it's like, you kind of, and I think that's what the turbo does, is like, you kind of, it's like the game we all play where it's like, what's the Mount Rushmore of, like, we want to compare things. That's the way our brains think.
Yeah. I feel like the Meikle Tour, like the Meikle Tour Turbo is like the Justin Bieber jacket at the All-Star game. It's like,
Yeah.
it's like it's somehow fashionable right now.
Yeah.
And like probably costs a lot more money than everything else, but you could probably
I'm
just have done
curious.
with.
If you could hook Billy Walker and his team up to the lie detector test and say, you could go back in time and like maybe rename this something a little bit more subtle, I wonder if they would, or if they secretly kind of like the buzz that's happened.
I think they know that this is gonna collect. This is gonna be a collectible. Unfortunately, like I hate the fact that it's a collectible because I actually tried to buy a second bottle today so I can enjoy this again, and
Yeah, I don't think you're gonna find one.
I probably won't find one.
I don't think there's gonna be much floating around on secondary either. I think people are opening this.
I hope so. Like, I mean, it's unfortunate because Springbank, everybody loves Springbank, quote unquote, but how many people are actually opening Springbank?
No, I think, yeah, that's a good comparable, because one of the things that happens with Springbank that's totally happened with Turbo is I think there's a lot of people that probably actually don't really love Springbank, but feel that they kind of have to have one.
Yeah.
And that
It's the
exacerbates the
FOMO.
problem. And that's what happened with Turbo. I think there's probably some people out there that, might be the type of customer that maybe like lines up for Ardbeg 25 releases
Yeah.
and this wouldn't be on the radar normally, but
Yeah.
because of what it is, they're like, oh no, I need one of those.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
Turbo is a terrible name. It is something that Ardbeg would probably come up with. Why wouldn't they just
Yeah.
go like the Hearts or something? Like something that speaks to what it actually is.
Well, okay, so this is the thing, Jeremy, is like, to be honest, when I was there and I tasted in the lab with like Ronan, who's like Billy's right hand, I kind of was like getting this sense that this was like, they don't have a like marketing department.
Yeah, no
Like,
kidding.
it's not like this was some like grand plan to like make a splash. Like, I think this is kind of a coincidence. Like, I think they kind of thought like, oh, this is kind of quirky, it's kind of cute. But
Do you
to
think
say this is like a big grand marketing plan actually I don't think is true.
do you think the name is selling people though?
Yes.
I hate those people then. Like,
Yeah.
I
Like,
don't
they
mean
could have called it Meikle Tòr the mullet, right? And
mullet.
like
The mullet.
Jeremy would have felt the same way about the name.
Party in the front.
No.
Sorry, business in the front, party in the back. That would have been a great name,
But, like,
actually.
that's not Scotch whiskey.
No,
That's like
I don't
Well,
think
but it's become Scotch whiskey.
no,
right?
that's
to
like
be honest with you, I'll tell you
that's like Crown Royal or like some bourbon or some shit like
Jeremy,
that.
the crazy thing is that Brooklady and Compass Box and then Ardbeg doing that, like that's now 20 years deep.
yeah, they're not going away, dude. They're not
Like
going
the Yellow
away.
Submarine, that's 15 years ago.
Yeah, that's Brooklady, and that's still super popular.
Right.
Like
3-year-old deluxe, that's 12 years ago, isn't it?
I feel like the name Turbo is not necessarily what sold these guys. I think it's on the box. And it's something that Ralphie screams about all the time, and I respect him for it, and he's right. And I really do believe that Ralphie moved the needle on this. But everything you need to know about this whiskey is on the box and on the bottle.
It's on the front of the label.
That's what I mean.
71 ppm, 5 years old, no color added, non-chill filtered, the ABV
50%.
Yeah.
It tells you on the back that it's like the combination of American Virgin Oak casks, 5 Oloroso hogsheads.
Yeah.
It's specific.
Yeah.
I got to ask you guys, did you like the new Glenallachie package? Yes or no?
I did.
Yeah.
I actually really like it.
I do like them. I like the new packaging.
I like this packaging
just because
as well.
I hated the font on the old Glenallachie
Okay,
stuff.
the number of people, like I remember when I hit the road in the early days with Glenallachie, every single person told me this box makes no sense. But people expected it because they remembered like the original Ben Riach box, even like arguably Deanston, right, which was a Billy Walker thing. Like he doesn't have a track record for creating like great packaging.
You know what though? I think he's a genius. I think we underestimate how brilliant this guy is, because for a while, like he let the liquid speak for itself. And then he noticed that the 21-year-old was getting collected and nobody was opening it. And the 30-year-old was getting collected and nobody was opening it. And he's like, you know what? I might as well change the labeling now. And then maybe in the future, when this is like, people realize we're not going away. This is going to be a regular release. The 21 is going to be a regular release. The 30 is going to be a regular release. Maybe people will stop collecting it and then like real whiskey drinkers can start like actually
Well,
drinking.
I will say, I mean, yeah, it's a little bit like I think it'll be like Springbank where it'll be gettable. Things like the 21 and 30, like the amount that's coming into the market is slowly creeping up from like impossible to get to, a little bit more like the turbo where it's like it's doable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I gotta say that the last 2 sips of the sherry have been unbelievable as
It
well.
has opened up, actually. You're right. You're right.
The
Yeah,
sherry-
something that I usually notice about Young Spirit that thankfully this doesn't have. And let's be clear, their plan originally was not to be like, hey, let's bang this out at 5 years and like turn a buck. Actually, that was not the plan. I think they just realized like, wow, the Spirit's like in good shape now. Like it's
Good
ready.
enough. It's this is comparable to stuff, and James, it doesn't happen very often, but you and I have to disagree today. I do believe this hits above its weight class. Like I think that you can compare this to a 10-year-old Isla. You
Yeah.
can compare this
Yeah, I
to,
would agree with that.
you know what I mean? Like the
Well-
sherry is comparable to the
Yeah,
Lefroy
right.
10.
So
And-
one of the things that I hope happens with stuff like this is what we desperately need. And like, I know we're at the tip of the iceberg and the whiskey business has slowed down and we don't know what that's going to look like. And we're not seeing like prices coming down, but what we might see is there's all these new distilleries coming to market, right? And I think you guys have probably noticed like all of them think that they're Springbank 2.0.
Yeah,
They all do.
of course they
Every
do.
single one of them.
Yep.
There's some opportunities for them to do stuff like this and be very disruptive,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Like Ardnam Merkin's doing it now, right? Like the Ardnam Merkin ADs are what? They're $79.99 retail now.
That's a good price. Yeah, that's solid.
That's what it should be.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think that's what's needed. The fact that, once this is regularly distributed next year, probably, maybe the year after, and places like the LCBO gets this bottle and all over the US is getting this bottle. I think the price will stabilize and you'll have less retailers trying to jack it up just to get like an extra few bucks because they only got 1 case of turbo. You know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
these all were originally supposed to be the same price.
Yeah.
You're going to see the turbo be a little bit more because it's more rare. People are
Well,
asking for it more.
we're going to start seeing more things like this, I think, coming out of the spirits business in Scotland because and from Ireland and from the US because more like everyone's experimenting, people are creating cool stuff. Obviously a lot of it's young, but it's on its way and I think you're gonna see more interesting things like Meikle Tòr coming down the pipe. But the question is like, you have to do something really good to stand out. I think Meikle Tòr did a good job of this. Like
Yeah.
if they had whiffed here, like people would have been quite happy to forget about this in 30 seconds.
100%. They did not miss the mark here. Billy Walker rarely does.
Yeah.
I don't think I've.
You know what? I've always thought Billy Walker's secret is that he basically had like 20 years in the business in good positions, right? Like working for Chivas, blah, blah, blah. And then he kind of got to the prime of his career when he had tons of experience and like wisdom. And then he got to do whatever he wanted.
Yeah.
Like at Enrique and Glendronach, he had like carte blanche, right?
Yeah. And
And so
that's what like
he's done. He
that's
doesn't
what a
have someone
creative
peering
person
over his
needs.
shoulder.
He
Yeah.
even writes it on the box too.
What does it say?
Being independent, we have the complete freedom to do things our way. Every step of this whiskey making journey has been meticulously considered and masterfully optimized to the sheer and
Ensuing aromatic and
aromatic
flavor
and
characteristics of the whiskey.
There you go.
Well, I should
Jeremy's not
shout
wearing his
out,
glasses.
like I was talking about Ronan Curry, who of course used to work at Springbank and now is like working in the lab with Billy. Like Billy leans on Ronan to a certain degree too. Like I think Ronan deserves probably more credit than he's getting in all this, especially with this Meikle Tòr project.
That's actually probably good news. Like, how old
Yeah,
is
it is
Billy
good
Walker?
news.
You know what I mean? Like, how
No,
old is
I had this moment where I thought, because like I tasted these products in the lab with Ronan, and I kind of thought, like, man, in 30 years from now, am I going to be like, wow, I tasted the first Meikle Tòr with Ronan Curry? I don't know, maybe. Like he definitely seems to be obviously he's getting good tutelage and he seems to have some ability. So it's fun to see that Billy's not just like on an island, right? And a lot of you guys probably are aware of this, but Billy's son also works in the business. He doesn't work for Glenallachie specifically,
Oh, no, I
but
didn't know that.
he might come back.
Huh.
Yeah, he worked with Billy in some of the previous projects, but currently he have you seen the frequent flyers? Independent
Yes.
kilometer or
Yeah,
infrequent flyers?
they sell it out of
That's Alistair Walker.
they sell it out of the UK a lot, right? The
Yep.
frequent flyers, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, like what's that store I'm thinking of? It's a lesser known UK store, but not so lesser known now.
Mhm.
Is
Uh,
it Ralphie's store?
No,
The Spirits Company?
no, not Good Spirits Company. That's not his store though.
Most of the one he goes to.
That's the one he goes to, yeah. It starts with a T, I believe. I'm not gonna think of it, so I'll move on. But man, these are all really good. I actually really enjoy all three of these. They're gonna be some of my go-to whiskeys for the next little while.
Got to source the original.
Where can we get the two that are still available? And the three, I should say, that are still available, including the original.
Yeah, you're gonna have to fish around. Yeah, to be honest, we made these products. I put out an email making them, kind of open to just about anyone, and that's in both BC and Alberta. They sold out very quickly, but I was very democratic. Everyone had a shot at them. We didn't give one retailer an edge over another.
Yep.
So yeah, it'll be kind of interesting. It kind of puts me in a tough position. I've always wondered, like, how does Springbank get allocated? I try to not, we do our allocation process because, obviously we have all these allocated whiskeys in our portfolio,
Right.
with Ben Romick and Michter's and Glenallachie as well. We try to, like, it's not relationship based. It's not like, oh, like, well, Andrew Ferguson's my buddy, so I'll toss him an extra case. We do not do that.
Yeah.
It's all just like a formula that we do. But yeah, the Meikle Tòr one I think is going to be a challenge to do in the future. But
Well, what do you know what the plan is for more releases? Like next year, we're
I
gonna get
do, but I am
six-year-old
not
or
allowed to say that.
okay.
Yeah. But
But there
yeah,
will
needless to say,
be
like, there's a
you're
lot of fun Meikle Tòr that will for sure be coming.
and you're thinking like will we see it like yearly, like the releases every year?
At least.
Okay.
Yeah, we're gonna get those like funky, like different casks, like Billy Walker likes to do. Like his, he does it with Glenallachie. He's gonna do it with Meikle Tòr.
Well, that's the thing. Like, if someone told you, like, I'm totally making this up. I have no idea if this is a future Meikle Tòr, but if it was like Meikle Tòr Port Cask, Meikle Tòr Ruby Port, and Meikle Tòr Tawny Port,
Yeah, I'm buying
I
all
want
three
to
of
have all
those.
three of them.
Yeah, 100%. Well, like
Right?
you already
You're
sold
like,
me.
Billy, you got me again.
Yeah, of course he
No,
does. Like
see, I would
this-
prefer if you just did the Talisker thing and blended those three together and made one whiskey.
that was cool.
Yeah,
That was cool,
and
but
I
you didn't
think,
like that Talisker as much.
I didn't like it, but I thought it was cool. Like the idea of it was cool. To use white
Well,
port and tangy and ruby.
right, and then like, yeah, blended them. I think part of this is, and like, even tasting all four of these, like, even though I say original is my favorite, like, it's not like there's one that I'm like, oh, well, this one's a miss.
I feel like it's gonna change, James.
Yeah, because they're not going to know, like, this is what happened with Glenallachie. Like, you guys remember the first early batches of like 10-year-old batch 1 and 2, and the first batches of 18
Yeah,
that didn't have a lot of sherry. It's not like they were like just waiting for the sherry casks to come online. They actually
Oh,
didn't
right.
genuinely know if that's the route they were going to go.
When I first recommended, I remember specifically because I was teaching Muay Thai at a dojo that we were renting out the mats, and I first recommended Glenallachie 18 to someone, and it was like it looked like a bourbon cask, but it had like a whole bunch of different casks involved in it. And the guy tasted it and he's like, "Do you have anything you could trade me for this bottle? Because I'm actually not that much of a fan of it. I prefer more sherry." And I'm like, I loved that bottle.
Yeah.
So I traded him in an instant. Like it was like an easy trade for me, but like the Glenallachie like core range, just bourbon cask or like predominantly bourbon cask, I loved. I thought it was
Yeah.
fantastic. What were you going to show us there for a sec?
No, I was just reading the side of the Meikle Tòr box.
Yeah.
Just because I didn't, to be honest, explore all those little details as well.
Yeah, honestly, like these are all great, and I'm really happy with each one of them. I think they did an incredible job,
Mhm.
but to be honest with you, I didn't delve into like the special wine cask Glenallachies and all that other stuff. I think that's never been my thing.
Mm.
But every Glenallachie I've ever had, I've loved. Have you ever had was there ever a bad Glenallachie?
No, I've
Like,
only had a couple of like the wood finish ones, but the ones I've tried have been great.
all the port ones are great. All the sherry ones are great. Every single 10 I've had, whether I like some better than others, were all great.
Mhm.
The 12s were all
Yeah,
incredible.
I always think this always thought really applies to Compass Box, but to a lesser degree, things like Ben Romick and Glenallachie is when you are small, the spotlight is really on you. Like, you can't like the idea that you might try to like sneak something out the door to like get rid of some cast or something like you can't do that when you're small. Like
No.
your entire market is enthusiasts. Like, there's a lot of accountability when you're an independent producer like this.
Yeah.
Like that's what it always boggled my mind about Compass Box. Like I think people always kind of have this like natural assumption that they went out and like found some like second rate casks, like marked it up, kind of like cleverly blended it so you don't notice, and like put a fancy label on the front.
Yeah.
And it's like actually 180 degrees opposite is true,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. They have no idea how much they spent on those casks and
Mm-hmm.
the time
And
they put
likewise, I
into
think
the
Meikle Tòr,
yeah.
would have been subject to that scrutiny too. Like if they just like released something that was just super strange and you're like, what were they thinking? Like everyone in the business would know right away. Like they couldn't sneak that on people. There's just no way they could do that. I'm curious what you guys would critique about this stuff. Like obviously they like checks a lot of boxes here, but I'm curious what the critique would be.
I think the only maybe critique of the turbo is there's a bit of heat that like maybe some people
Yeah.
can't approach, right? Like
Don't you
I
notice it
like
tastes the youngest too? That's what struck me is it actually does taste younger than the other ones.
yeah,
At
I
least I
feel
thought
like
so.
that's probably true, and that's probably I mean it is higher in ABV. I don't think it matters much because like the people that are going to be attracted to the turbo, if they're actually popping that bottle, are going to like that bottle.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you're not going to get a Macallan drinker opening up a bottle of Meikle Tòr Turbo. I mean,
No.
like this is, you know what I mean?
Right. Like
Someone who drinks like Glen Grant 10.
Yeah.
Yeah. The youthfulness of the turbo like doesn't really take away from the experience.
Yeah, no, I think it's a bit hotter than the other ones, but I think that kind of works for it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'll say too, what occurred to me too, especially like when you tie things like the Chinquapin and the Turbo, if you're someone that is like a distillate lover and loves whiskey that, has elegance to it,
yeah.
like these things are a bit brash
Yeah,
from that perspective.
it's totally not
For
like
sure.
you're not gonna
Like
get
if you
as
like
much of the
drinking
new
like
make.
the Glenkinchie 27 and the Delos,
Yeah.
like this isn't your jam.
This is
No.
way different.
Yeah, Delos and Glenkinchie can be like mentioned in the same sentence, whereas
Yeah, they're very similar whiskeys in a lot of ways.
right,
Yeah.
100%. Whereas the turbo would be like better mentioned in an Octomore conversation,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
Like, and it's not as like heavy in ABV or PPM. Well, maybe in PPM because we don't know. Like, when is Octomore measuring their PPM? When it like not when it goes into bottle
Yeah, they're measured in the malt.
in the
Yeah.
malt. So that's like not even fair.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
It's
if you-
probably coming in at 30, 40, maybe 50 ppm in bottle.
These whiskeys it's like listening to hard rock music
Yeah.
and those Delos and Glenkishi, that's like a classical opera.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That
style.
makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's what you're in the mood for.
The
Usually
turbo
whiskey's
is
best if you go hard one way or the other, I find.
Right.
the turbo is Nirvana.
Right.
The turbo is
It's
Nirvana.
grunge.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
like
there's a lot of guitar distortion.
Yeah.
The Sherry is Pearl Jam.
Okay.
The Chinquapin is like
Weezer? Green Day?
no, something
A
lighter.
little bit edgier.
Like maybe
Yeah, maybe Green Day.
yeah, okay, I'll go with Green Day.
Green Day's a little more commercial.
I haven't
People
tried
are
the
watching this
original.
going like shouting the name of some other obscure band that they love.
Oh, 100%. Which and it has to be 90s. So like stick to the 90s.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're gonna say the original is Soundgarden.
Okay.
Oh my God. That has to like sound like an angel then.
Rob's band sounds like Soundgarden to me a lot.
I wish. Chris Cornell is my idol.
There you go. Well, there's the influence.
But like if
That's,
that's the influence, I'm doing a
like
terrible job.
Soundgarden, Collective
My
Soul.
go-to, Jeremy, when I would do cigars with my buddies, I would always put on, that the last Chris Cornell live album that he recorded.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's perfect smoking
Yeah.
soundtrack.
Yeah, I should try it.
Yeah, you should try it.
He actually does a cover of Nothing Compares
Oh, really?
by who is that? Sinead O'Connor?
I think so.
Is that Sinead O'Connor? I could be wrong. Anyway,
Yeah.
if that's not Sinead O'Connor, I don't know.
Someone likes Sinead O'Connor.
Something
if
like
it's not her.
I'm pretty sure it is her.
Yeah.
Actually, now that I think about it, he does a cover of that. That's like God rest his soul, man. That guy was an angel.
And
The way
sings
he
it in
sang.
the same kind of key as well, or different.
That guy can hit anybody's key.
Yeah, okay.
That guy can like. No, I'm not exaggerating when I
Let's
say
be
that
honest,
guy.
when Chris Cornell sings, like, especially if you've ever seen him live, like, man, the hairs on the back of your neck stand up. Like,
Dude, Jack Black actually recently, I don't know if it was recently, but I recently read a quote from Jack Black. And Jack Black's a great artist as well. Like he's an awesome actor, hilarious, but great artist. And he's like, when Chris Cornell used to sing, the gates of heaven used to open up. Like that's like he literally said that. So like Chris Cornell is like the best.
that guy was like kind of good looking too, like he just had that, like, you just tell, like, it's just not fair.
Yeah. Well, that guy, okay. So like I always have this thing where like if a guy is not the best looking guy, but super popular, it's because he's actually like super talented. Chris Cornell breaks all the molds for all that because like he's a good looking guy and he's like ridiculously talented. So yeah, it's not.
I know it's in your guys' spank bank.
That's that's a little excessive. Unfortunately, I'm 100% heterosexual. But
I don't know. You said Chris Cornell like 8 times just recently. So
yeah, because like he's a legend. He literally is a legend. Unfortunately, I'm 100% heterosexual. Unfortunately,
So yeah, this is Meikle Tòr. I know there's almost like a sense I have. It's like it's here. Everyone's tried it now. It's like I can breathe. I really
Turbo
genuinely
is
thought this might be like
unbelievable. It's so good, dude. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Well, James, you weren't really thinking like this might be a risk to bring it in the market, did you? Like it's peated Glenallachie. Like what's the risk of
yeah,
this?
I don't know. I think I've just learned that, keep expectations low. I think I just have some discipline there because I've been involved in so many different like product launches. And again, when we launched Glenallachie, we were so excited internally. Like I was pumped to go out and like have the 10 and 12 and 18 in my bag.
Yeah.
And like, man, there was some hard days on the road with Glenallachie in the early days. And I was just like, I was devastated because I kind of put my neck out too. Like they contacted us to represent them because we'd worked with them before. And like they flew someone over from Scotland, trained our team, got it. Like we put so much behind it. And like it fought. I'll be 100% honest. After about 1.5 to 2 years, we actually had internal conversations about ditching the brand.
Yeah, I believe that
So
because I
working.
remember when it first came out, everybody had like high hopes for it, and then it fell flat for a
Yeah,
while.
which is a shame because if you've gone back and tried batch 1 and 2,
They're amazing.
They're really good. Of
Even the
10-year-old.
12, the original
But they-
12 was
Yeah,
fantastic.
the original batches of 12 were great. Yeah, I mean 18 too, if that's your style. But I'd probably prefer the newer batches of 18 personally. But
I honestly think they have Ralphie to thank for their popularity because he named the 12 whiskey of the year.
well, yeah, there's basically like 2 or 3 things that happened kind of all at once. So Ralphie did that, and then shortly after, like just a few months after that, that batch 4 won the World Whiskey of the Year at the World Whiskey Awards.
Yeah, that batch
And
4 was ridiculous.
to be honest, I thought like no one paid attention to that stuff. Like, like you get those emails about like award shows, you're like, okay, great. It was like, it was like 2 guys in Toronto sitting in a basement judging whiskey. Like,
that's not far off. Like,
yeah, well, sometimes, right? When there was kind of that 6 months, I want to say it was the start of 2021, maybe it was the start of 2022. It's blurry now. That was probably like maybe the most exciting time I ever remember working in whiskey, because actually I got to give props to Adam, the guy that runs Chateau Louis in Edmonton. He actually called me and said like, hey, have you seen the new batch of 12? And this was actually, it's funny, it's the same shipment I think that batch 4 of 10-year-old was in. And like I went out and got one, and I was like, oh my gosh, because like the color had gone from this and was like this all of a sudden.
Yeah.
And I don't think like it had really occurred to us that like this was happening. And all of a sudden it was like, oh, this, like, clearly this is the direction that they're going. And
Boys
then
in
I
the
tried it,
toys,
and I was
man.
like, oh my gosh. And then the 10-year-old got that award. And like I tried batch 3 and it was for sure like more sherry, but like 4 was really full bore sherry.
Oh yeah.
And it was
I
just like
really like
that
batch
time
3
was
though.
really exciting.
You know what I mean? Like
we you guys may have seen this. We actually selected a cask. So last year we didn't really have like an interested person in buying like a full single cask in Canada, because the prices have gone up a little bit, and like it's tough. Glenallachie single casks are like, there's like 650 bottles in it, right?
yeah, there's
like,
a lot.
It's tricky.
Yeah.
But they ended up pulling, we kind of talked with them and we said, okay, well, let's get a cask and just like split it across Canada a little bit. And they ended up pulling this 2011 PX Hogshead that, I was kind of talking to them, and we found this cask that had not been re-racked by Billy. So it was like an original.
Oh wow.
So it's definitely more like this type of color, but it's so delicious. Like it's just very it's very succulent, but it doesn't have a lot of heavy sherry character. It's just kind of like fruity and creamy and kind of fun.
Nice.
That's cool.
So like it's interesting that they still do have those casks there, Like it's not like it all got ripped up.
I don't think that was by accident. I think Billy went around. He's like, yeah, re-rack this one.
Oh, they tasted every cask, Rob. Every single cask.
Yeah, I believe that.
Yeah.
I do. I totally believe that.
Yeah.
Yeah, like that's what I mean by like what he named these, and nothing's by accident. Like everything is on this label for a reason. And they knew that they could only do so many of the hearts cuts, the heart of the hearts, right? I'm sure all these have a little bit of hearts in them.
Increase the amount of peated whiskey they do next year based on how this has been received. Because currently, I think it's about 10% of the production. Like last year was about 10% of the production.
Yeah.
I think it was about 6 weeks of run.
The beauty of peated whiskey is they can continue to release a 5-year-old and people will continue to buy it, because peated whiskey is great young.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah. No, that's part of the reason they bottled this, is that they noticed that the phenol levels were dropping.
Yeah. And that's what's going to happen. Like there will be a time where they have to label this Glenallachie because it's 25 years old and it's not
peated at all.
It's not peated at all. You know what I mean?
Imagine what a 25-year-old turbo will taste like. It actually might not even be better than the 5-year-old.
It probably wouldn't. Like
yeah, that's an interesting point.
Well, I think Octomore has proved that, right?
Well,
like,
we drank Ardbeg 25.
What about your Event Horizon? Isn't that like 12 years old?
Yeah.
Your Octomore?
Yeah.
And like it's not better than like a 6.3.
Well,
Correct.
remember the Port Charlotte PC series? I thought that each release got worse than the one before it. Like 5 was
Really?
my favorite, and then 6 was awesome. I love 7. 8, I was like, oh, I don't love it as much. And 9, like they're still good,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
like the peat level was dropping, and it got like it was less thrilling.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. I think these are all really cool. The way the sherry finished tonight, I think that might be like the popular, like,
Oh yeah, the
easier.
sherry's like the popular fun pick for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, the easier to get fun pick.
Yeah.
I actually, like, when we did this off camera a week ago,
Mhm.
I like the Chinquapin the best.
Out of all of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then that's changed like drastically tonight.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, the American Gladiator Turbo is the one I like. I wish they all went with American Gladiator names like Diamond and yeah.
That would have been great.
Yeah.
Ruby.
Ruby.
Ruby for the sherry one.
Was Ruby in a Gladiator?
I don't know.
Here are your American Gladiators. Ice Baby, John, Blade, the Thunderstorm, Laser, Disaster, Power, Nitro.
I don't know. Like,
So,
what are the
I'm curious. I don't know. Maybe you guys are still into wrestling, and like nothing against people that do it, but I mean, I was huge into it in high school.
high school? Yes.
If you're
Grade
like
9 was the end.
couple drams deep, and you're flipping channels, and wrestling's on, you linger there for a bit, right?
To be honest, no.
No.
How did Meikle Toir end up being a WWE conversation?
You know what it is? Okay, I genuinely believe this. When you're drinking peated whiskey, it brings out that like angry whiskey vibe in your brain a little bit more than like if you're drinking Delos all night.
You know, it's funny you mentioned that. I find wine does that to me. Like,
Oh no,
wine,
yeah, it's because you're
wine-
Italian, Rob.
Yeah, maybe. Maybe it's like a ancestral, like,
Yeah, you're
like,
genetically disposed, like
yeah, like,
intended to have that.
So like the Romans
Jeremy,
would
you're
like
Irish, right?
have wine.
Irish, yeah.
Yeah, so you want to like dance and play music and like write poems when you're deep on the whiskey. Is that
Yeah,
is
you know,
that
I
true?
haven't
Or do like
experienced-
the
I haven't
Conor McGregor like
experienced
strut.
No, I don't want to do any of those things. I don't want to fight people. I don't want to eat potatoes. I don't want to strut or sing or
I'm
jig
never- yeah.
or search for gold coins on a rainbow. I just
I'm
want to
not-
relax and drink.
I honestly, like, the only time I'm ever like a slightly angry drunk is when I drink wine.
Yeah, you get angry.
I don't know why. I don't know what it is about wine. Maybe it's like the gladiators used to like drink that. That's like part of my lineage before they walked into the arena, or
Yeah,
like
yeah,
before
yeah.
the Romans lined up
Right.
against like the whatever.
Did this is a little bit off topic, but did you ever rub whiskey on your kids' gums, Rob?
I didn't. Honestly, my parents never did that to me.
You think he's
either,
gonna admit
actually.
that on
Yeah,
podcast?
James, you trying to get me fired, man?
I know. Well, we're already demonetized, so
My grandmother, I think, might have attempted to do that to me with like Di Serono, like an Emirado or something like that. Yeah. That might have happened, and it probably worked. It's probably why I like Di Serono.
James, you are the man. We love you. These
Well-
Meikle Tours are fantastic.
Yeah.
don't call me the man until you find out if you're invited to the 85-year-old.
Whatever, man. Like, there's very little you could do to make me dislike you at this point.
I
Do you?
agree.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like,
Very kind. I'm just lucky I work some great companies that know what they're doing and they actually care about us. They're not just like hoping for a bonus.
I think that's key, because you have a little bit, maybe, I don't know if that's true, but maybe you fight a little bit harder than other people, but
You know what
you're
it is,
not.
Rob? You know how many people in our business don't actually love the whiskey business and love whiskey? There's a lot.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I believe that.
They like it.
It's
They enjoy
apparent.
it, but they don't love it.
It's apparent. It's obvious. Like, I think, and that's the toughest sell, is when you have guys that are ambassadors or like clients of a company, and they can't honestly say that they love their product more than whatever it is. You know what I mean? Whereas
Some
I
of those
think
people are
you're
great people, but yeah, you're right. Sometimes those roles, that was just like a promotion from like a junior marketing role.
yeah,
And it,
yeah.
and to be
I
fair,
think you're
like there's
lucky.
probably people that are more passionate teachers than you are, but like good for them.
100%. Yeah,
But
exactly.
yeah, when it does come together, especially in this type of business, when you get like the people that really care like that, and then they get their hands on the steering wheel like Billy has,
Yep.
or like the Urquhart family, GM, like good things happen.
Well, you guys were passionate enough to stick with Glenallachie, which is great, or otherwise we would probably be talking to someone else about these whiskeys. And
Yeah, every bottle would be going to Quebec.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, probably. These are great.
All right, guys, thanks for having me on.
Hey,
Much appreciated.
it's been our pleasure, and thank you so much for joining us yet again.
Yeah.
And thanks so much for watching, and have a good one, guys. We'll talk to you next time.
Cheers.